Welcome to this explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to be guiding you through our topic today because we're looking at a story with stakes that are literally life and death. We're exploring the phenomenal journey of Malala Yousafzai. And we aren't just going to list out the events that made her famous, we are going to structurally unpack how one young person's unimaginable ordeal transformed into a massive global movement. This is a story about the collision of fear and education and the totally unyielding power of a single voice.
There are moments in history when a single bullet is meant to end a voice. Just take a second and let the gravity of that statement really sink in. Throughout history, violence has so often been used as this ultimate silencing tool, a definitive, brutal end to any kind of opposition.
But sometimes that bullet does the exact opposite. Sometimes it tears right through the silence. It exposes the deep, underlying panic of tyrants. And sometimes, as our source material so poetically points out, it turns a schoolgirl into a symbol the whole world simply cannot ignore.
All right, Section 1, the bullet that failed. At its core, this is the story of a girl from Pakistan's Swat Valley. She was brutally attacked for wanting something so basic, something every child should get without ever having to beg: the right to learn. She didn't start out as a household name. She began as a daughter, a student, a kid in the town of Mangora, with books in her bag and big dreams in her head. She just loved the simple, ordinary miracle of raising her hand in class to answer a question.
Moving into Section 2, Shadows over Swat Valley.
The Swat Valley was a beautiful, almost poetic place. Ancient mountains standing like guardians, rushing rivers. But what really made it special for Malala was her father, Ziauddin Yousafzai. He actually ran a school there, and to him, education wasn't just a job, it was a sacred mission. He believed deeply that girls deserve the exact same dignity, future, and intellectual freedom as boys. In a society where a lot of girls were told to just stay quiet, he actively pushed his daughter to speak up, and she listened. But then, darkness entered the valley. Militants started spreading fear, and public life was radically transformed. Music was silenced, and women were essentially pushed into invisibility. Imagine this creeping reality as a kid. Suddenly your classroom is an incredibly dangerous place to be. Your everyday school uniform makes you a literal target, and your love for books? That's now considered a crime.
Which brings us to Section 3, the courage to speak. So, what does true courage actually look like? Well, our source tells us it's not just the absence of fear. Courage is knowing the danger is right there, staring you in the face, and still refusing to surrender your soul. Honestly, most adults would have stayed completely silent in her position. But her true bravery was refusing to let that fear dictate her existence.
Malala had this absolute core realization that drove her to speak out against all that darkness. She figured out that when fear controls your voice, it's only a matter of time before it controls your future. If she stayed quiet, the future for every single girl in that valley was basically gone.
Let's look at Section 4, The World Awakens.
If we trace her journey back, in 2009, Malala started speaking out. She was actually writing under a fake name for BBC Urdu, just describing what life was like under Taliban influence. Even after she was publicly identified, she just kept on campaigning. Then came October 9, 2012. She's just 15 years old, and a gunman boards her school bus and attacks her. Yet, incredibly, fast forward to 2014, and she becomes the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate in history.
Now, the extremists had a really straightforward goal: silence this girl and punish her for defending education. But the actual outcome? Literally the exact opposite. She awakened a massive global movement that directly sparked Pakistan's very first right to education bill. Millions of people rallied for change. The attackers thought they'd defeated her, but man, they didn't understand Malala at all.
On the day of that attack, for a moment, the whole world just kinda stopped. An ordinary school bus became a crime scene. A young girl's simple dream became a global headline, and a family's absolute worst nightmare became this incredible moral test for the rest of the world. While Malala was fighting for her life, eventually being flown to Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham to recover, the world finally started asking the tough question: why should any girl have to risk her life just to sit in a classroom?
Section 5, Redefining True Triumph.
When Malala stepped back into the public eye, she totally refused to let the tragedy define her as a victim. And here's the amazing part: she didn't come back spewing hatred or demanding revenge. Not at all. She came back with a voice demanding books, schools, and teachers.
She took this unimaginably horrific suffering and channeled it completely into purpose.
Because that is true triumph. It's choosing meaning over misery. It's carrying the scar and choosing to walk forward anyway. It is refusing to let cruelty write the final chapter of your life. She didn't pretend the attack never happened. She literally used it as the foundation to build something infinitely better.
At just 17 years old, 17, the girl who was hunted down simply because she wanted to go to school stood before the entire world. She made history sharing the Nobel Peace Prize with Kailash Satyarthi, an Indian children's rights activist, honoring their joint fight for every kid's right to an education. But you know, the real victory wasn't that gold medal. It was the fact that her voice became so much louder than the extremists who tried to silence her.
Honestly, nobody would have blamed Malala if she just decided to live a quiet, safe, private life after recovering. But instead, she chose the much harder path. Through the Malala Fund, she kept working. She took her own deeply personal story and turned it into a tireless, global campaign for girls' education everywhere. She just kept walking forward for the sake of others.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, A Light for Others.
There is a really uncomfortable truth that Malala's story forces us to look at. The people who fear education, they aren't actually afraid of books. They are terrified of what those books wake up inside a person. Because a girl with an education becomes a lot harder to control. A girl with a voice is much harder to erase. And a girl with knowledge, she becomes a future that no tyrant can ever command.
And that is exactly why her story matters so much to us today. It's for every kid who's ever been told, this place isn't for you, and every girl told to lower her dreams. Standing right behind Malala are millions of girls with backpacks, parents praying for their safety, and teachers keeping those school doors open. All of them sharing one huge realization. Education is not charity. It is justice.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, let's not just think of Malala as a survivor. She's the girl who rose. The girl who took the absolute darkest day of her life and turned it into a massive light for others, proving that while tragedy might break the body, courage absolutely gets the final word. I want to leave you with a provocative question to really chew on today, straight from the heart of her incredible journey. Will your society fear educated women or be strengthened by them? Think about that as you process everything we've talked about. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.